No one goes through life and they're just like all happy all the time. So it's like, why ignore that? And why not just explore that as a creative avenue as well? And it's like, so then you get to like see it all. If you dive into it, like that's when you're going to really see who you are and what you're about. The weird, freaky thing about photography is moments only happen once. You know that this is never going to happen again. And that can be very motivating.
It's interesting how all these creative minds work. There's no real one way of doing anything. And even like, speaking with Sean McDonald, and part of our conversation was how the camera is an extension of you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you see artwork, photos, there's just the gamut, the array of how things can be captured. So, even when you say like this particular discipline, it almost pigeonholes it in a way that just doesn't serve it justice. It's adding a label to something that doesn't feel like it needs a label.
Yeah, right.
Almost like saying, oh, this person, he paints.
Yeah.
He or she paints. Like that doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just the medium.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because it's like I tried to get to a point where I knew the camera inside and out so I didn't have to think about it as a tool. And I kind of only put the camera to my eye when I really feel that the shot is there. Like I'm not someone that shoots a ton. And I think that's come from essentially starting in film photography and you're super limited and you got to think and you're like, is this the frame? And yeah, so now when obviously shoot digital as well, it's like, it doesn't matter which one I'm shooting. It's like, until I'm like, oh, there's something here, like that's when I'll take a photo.
Do you think it's a little bit different now with up and coming photographers that maybe not have the luxury of starting with film? So that discipline isn't necessarily there. Like we're so accustomed to taking our phones out of our pockets and you just snap, right? And whatever, like that's almost habitual. You don't even think about, not that you need to think about the composition or the frame, you just want to capture that moment.
Yeah.
Whereas photography as a hobby, as a profession, as an extension of you wanting to create art, you have that discipline because you have been trained that way. But with these up and coming photographers, would the habit be more snap away until somewhere in that sequence of snaps is maybe the right shot?
There's definitely that. And like every photographer has their own way of shooting, and that's kind of who they're shooting with or what subject matter they're shooting. Like sometimes you need to be fast and on the trigger all the time. Like if you're shooting like a punk rock show or a gig, you kind of have to be there with the energy. So if you're kind of just waiting, you can get a great shot, but you might never get the shot because what you're imagining in your head is not there. So you got to roll with it. And then the other thing I think is like the younger generation now, they just like try to get photographs out so quick. It's like the social currency is like this happened now and like I'm posting about it and I'm kind of first. Whereas like because I started shooting with film, it would take time to get that photo back. And I'm like someone that definitely takes my time even reviewing the images. So I might shoot them, I might send them off to get processed, but then I'll just leave them. And I just won't even look at them for 6 months, a year, so that emotional connection is kind of gone. And I can look at it subjectively and say, hey, there's actually a really good image in here, rather than like, that's the one I connected to with the most at the minute. Because that's sometimes where you miss it. Like you might have captured something that just like you kind of resonated with at the time, but it wasn't the strongest image. So what I find interesting is like people that are like, oh, this is what I shot on the weekend and this is what I shot last night and this and that. Whereas I definitely come from a place that it's like, I'm looking at work that's like 5 years old sometimes. And then I'm seeing the stuff in it. And I'm like, I'd be happier to kind of like shoot a project, let it just sit in the background, get on with my life, shoot other things, and then revisit it later to see where the kind of story actually is. Because it is really like how you look at the world is right there in front of you, but sometimes you got to give it a little space.
Yeah, Yeah. So the projects that you working on, because what's the one that you're doing in a minute?
So this morning, like literally just before this, I went and dropped off and at the printer and like dropped off all my files and we're choosing paper stocks and like cover stocks. And it's like a project I shot over 6 years. And I wanted a project that would get me out of Melbourne because I was essentially living and working in the same suburb. So I decided like, how can I get out of Melbourne and find stories there? Because I also think that shooting in your own backyard is quite difficult. And you know, it's easy to go overseas somewhere where everything's new and shoot, but if you really look at where you're surrounded by and find stories there, it can be quite challenging to get into. So I was like, stumbled across the rodeo rider scene in Victoria, and I just was literally driving home from a surf trip, and on an electrical pole, I saw a little kind of like handmade like flyer that just said Bunyip Rodeo Australia Day. And those three things together, like A, where is Bunyip? What does a rodeo look like in Australia? Like that's such an Americanized thing. And then on like a day like Australia Day, like what am I going to walk into here? So it was like 2 weeks later. So I just got my cameras and I said to myself, like, I'm going to see how close I can get to this before I get kicked out, you know? So I turn up, it's literally in a paddock. There's like nothing except like fences and hay bales to stand on. And I was like, well, crazy. Like this is a whole different subculture that I've never been a part of. So I just try to get as close as I can and like start asking for portraits and creep closer and closer to the shoots. And then like I was basically right next to them as they're being loaded on livestock. And then you kind of had in the back of your head, you're like, I'm going to get kicked out of here eventually. And then I didn't. And then I shot all day and, you know, maybe 2 or 3 rolls of 120 film, so like 30 photos. And then I got those back a couple of weeks later and I was like, there's something here. Like there's something that's really interested me in who these people are, what this kind of event is like an American event in an Australian kind of like scene. And just having the subject matter of like, they don't really care that I'm there. Like the first thing they want to do is give me a thumbs up, but to crack that and kind of get a good photo of them is a little difficult. So all those things combined, I was like, I'm just going to keep going. And then over the course of like 6 years, I just shot it. So yeah, it's just been really fascinating to use a project as a vehicle to kind of escape the suburb that I live and work in, but then also to see what else is out there. And in Victoria especially, it's like you go 100 Ks out, that's a whole different world. Like I think for me, I was definitely like a victim of the little bubble that I was in, which is like can be a good thing, but to understand that there's stories outside of that and like a whole different kind of way of living was really fascinating, and it just kind of drove me to keep going.
Dude, it's like, you know, when you're going traveling, when you're going anywhere, and when you look back and you reflect on any kind of holiday and you plan out the itinerary, like this is where we're going to go, this is the place we're going to eat. But along the way, when you're traveling, a lot of those incidental kind of discoveries that you make, they're the ones that stick with you.
Yeah.
Like some of the random people that you encounter, or the times when you get lost just meandering the streets. And at the time, you're kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Well, like, where am I? But then you would discover something there, or you meet someone at that right moment in that particular environment, that time of day, and you're like, oof, this, and it just sticks with you, man.
Yeah.
And it's those times when it's unintentional as well. But I guess with what you're doing, the intention was to be open to those kind of discoveries.
100%. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to walk into. And then once you kind of see those first few photographs that you get back, then you start to be like, what are the stories here? Like, who are these people? Why do they do this? Like, what drives them to, you know, like, to participate? Like, it's a kind of crazy thing to do, right? It's like,
it's just layered as well, right? Because like you can't just look at that for what it is, because there's a whole, when you're saying the backstories, I suppose that's the job, that's your job as a photographer, as a creative photographer, is to peel back the layers, right? Like the photo is just capturing this particular moment, but you're trying to communicate so much behind it, and a lot of the work that you do, like portrait photography, and like not even just the portrait photography, but you show process.
Yeah.
You like to capture process. So ironically, you have a final piece, which is the photograph, but the photo is seizing moments in processes of artists as they're creating their final piece as well.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea of documenting that part of things.
Yeah. I definitely look for moments in scenes that are really like the quiet moments in chaotic scenes. And like something like a rodeo is littered with them. Like it's technically a very difficult thing to shoot, like the action. So I kind of stayed away from that because I knew that like that wasn't my aim. I was really focused on the people. So then to kind of meet these writers, it was just amazing. Like they're like really kind of young 20s, like at this weird turning point in their life of they're like just left school and they're trying to do something else, and they have this really extreme thing that kind of keeps them going, and it's like so fascinating, and they're so weathered because they're obviously working out in in the rural sun, and it's wild. And you then go back to your house and you're like these two worlds are so different. So it just kept driving me out there to go there. And yeah, it's just a kind of crazy thing. And I don't even think I could do it justice. Like I've kind of put the book together now, and it's like I could keep shooting this for years, like because I'm getting better and better access to the writers and getting to understand their stories. And, you know, I kind of put some limitations on myself by the gear that I chose to shoot the project on. And I'd probably switch that up if I was to do it again, just so I could get more impulsive kind of work.
It could be something like what's stopping you from making it an ongoing project anyway? Or it's not even a project, right? Like it's
absolutely
just
nothing.
Something that you do.
Yeah. I think I've spent long enough that I want to get this version out and then kind of see how I sit with it. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying before, is like, see how it sits with you, let it kind of simmer in the background. And then if it really strikes me in a year or two, then go back and shoot it in the way that I'm feeling then. It's just like, I don't really like the one project, like it's all a stepping stone to the whole journey. Like, I don't think it's like a magnum opus thing. I don't look at any work at like, this is the one thing that defines me. It's always like stepping your way, you know, to the next and the next. And it's the reason I kind of wrapped this current project is because I shot my second last shoot. I kind of got the photos back and I'm like, they just feel like the first photos I took, which means I've kind of staggered my growth with it. And then the last shoot that I did, I was just trying to like, there was 2 writers that I hadn't shot yet, but we just due to scheduling. And I was like, okay, this is my last, I'm wrapping it. Like I'll set up time with them, went out and shot them. And then I realized like, this is my last chance to do any photographs that I think need to be in the book that are a different perspective. And I shot that with those. And as soon as I shot that, I did something completely different at the end of it. I just sat with them and chatted for like an hour and a half about their like real experience and, you know, things that they've kind of witnessed while they've been in the scene. And that just like spat out so many new ideas. And it's like, so if I was to do this again, I think I'd do it in the opposite. I think I'd spend more time interviewing and like really getting to know my subjects before I even point a camera at them. So that's how I've changed as a photographer in the 6 years that I've shot it. Like my first curiosity was like, what does this look like? But now my curiosity is like, who are these people and how do I tell their story in a more kind of, you know, pictorial way? And that's a different challenge.
Yeah.
It's like, because then you have to like tell someone else's story rather than just what you see. But it's things like that just kind of keep you going, because I've always thought like I hope to be doing this until I'm quite old. Like photography in practice can be as simple as just pushing a button. I think what gets difficult is like the storytelling and like the older you get and the more kind of like you've witnessed in your life, the deeper and richer stories you can tell. And that's what I'm looking forward to when I'm like in my 70s and 80s and hopefully still holding a camera, is like, what are my stories going to be then from the life experience that I've had? And then also like how I kind of interact with people at that age.
Fuck, and it really forces you then to, when you're looking at life through that through that through that lens, then it really puts it in your mind to start engaging with the world in a different way now, right?
100%.
Then, like what you were saying, like, how do I tell richer stories now? It's like, fucking just get to know people.
Yeah. And that's like something that's only happened in the past couple of years. I think, my first few years, you're just kind of learning the camera and how it works and like how to operate this piece of machinery. And I definitely like left university thinking that photography is a trade. Like it's not like it's an art, yes, but it's really a trade. It's like how you operate the flash and the camera and this, and you just got to know your equipment. And then the more I shot, then I realized there's more storytelling. And that's what I'm trying to drive with personal projects is like, how do I explore things that I'm curious about? Because that's what got me into photography in the start. Like people that were performing and musicians or artists or little subcultures that were popping up here or there or destinations that I'd see on movies and then like, where was that? And then explore those and make projects there. So the curiosity is now what's kind of driving me, like to produce richer projects. And
but yeah, because it's an extension of you, right? Like, and it becomes more so as you get through life, you get to a certain point where, you start off early on as a baby, really curious about everything. And then there's a period through your teens and your 20s, you think you know everything. And when you get to your 30s, hopefully by then you start relinquishing that and you realize you don't know shit and there's a lot more to learn, a lot more to absorb. And as a photographer, you can use that understanding. And as that bit of equipment is an extension of you, you will naturally just have more substance in the shots, wouldn't you?
And that camera is an amazing key to open a lot of doors. Like I've got to work with people I would never think that I've even have an opportunity to chat to just because I hold a camera. They've let me into a show or their studio or traveled around the world to go film or photograph. Like that's another kind of amazing tool that just allows you into into other people's worlds.
And fuck, man, they really got to be open to it as well. Like some of the shots that you've taken, and of people that I know as well, and you've managed to capture them really well, where you know that they have just like relinquished, they've just dropped their guard. They're like, take the shot, and it's not even just taking the shot. It's like, let me be present in this shot as well. There's a degree of having that relationship, right, and be able to establish that trust. I think that's got to be one of the most important components.
I mean, it's awkward getting your photo taken.
Yeah,
like
that's what I'm saying.
It's a weird thing, and it's like
so when people are inviting you in, there's that trust that you've already established with them.
Yeah, I think maybe they can see that I'm like just fascinated about what they do, and they want to show that as well. But yeah, I've just been super lucky that like I think because I've been photographing for so long, like I can show the work to them prior and say, hey, look, this is what I'm really interested in. And they can see it rather than just being a bit younger and not having a folio that they're like, oh, what's this guy going to do? But I think if you let people have the space to feel comfortable, like you're going to get better photos. Something that happens to me quite often, like somewhere during a shoot, I might spend a few hours with someone, is they're like, I forgot you were here. And it's not because I'm like hiding off in the distance. It's just I'm just allowing people to be in their space and do their thing. Because what I want to see is how they actually like interact with their work and their studio. So I don't shoot a lot. Sometimes I'll talk to them if I notice they're nervy or whatever. But generally I just let things happen and just let them tell me about what they do. And that's awesome. Like that's when you know something's really working, is you're just kind of hanging out. And then even after that photo shoot, you might not see them for a while, but you just feel like friends and you might have never met before.
Yeah.
That might be your first experience with someone, but then 3 years later you see them on the street and you chat as if you're old friends. It's like, it's kind of crazy. It still blows me away.
Give us some examples of those kind of situations, because you have taken a lot of photos of in studio trying to capture people in their element.
I think because like with photography, I'm just super curious as an art form of like how do other people like painters, for example. I'm always like super curious of like you can just kind of take something from your brain and produce it onto a canvas. It's like as a photographer, I have to be somewhere. I have to be with someone. I have to kind of be a part of an experience to make an image, right? I can't like. There's a lot of artists that use photography as a completely art vent, but that's not really what I do. But to then go and see how like someone paints or like makes their art is like super interesting to me. It's like, how do you get that little nugget of inspiration from inside your brain out into the world in whatever means that is? And, you know, like...
Dude, I think about that as well. I don't know, you know, we all think differently. We all operate on our own kind of, on our own wavelength. When I look at some of the artists that you have photographed, and I think, and I look at their process and how they go from just that little nugget in their brain onto a canvas, I do wonder whether or not they have seen it beforehand or whether or not they just feel compelled to do it and then they just let it out.
Yeah.
And that's sort of similar to photography, where there are some people that can see it. They see the shot, right? And they're able to curate it and set it up and will spend hours and hours being meticulous in the studio and snap. That's the shot.
I'm not that dude.
You're not. You're capturing moments.
Yeah.
So with yours, and there's no preemptive visualizing of how it's going to go. You're just like, I've just got to be there.
Quite often that ruins it for me.
Yeah.
If someone's like, from a commercial point of view, mood boards are interesting. Like, I get it. Like, you kind of have to express what you're going to roughly do. But most people come to me because they know what they're going to get, right? So it's really nice in that capacity. But for a personal project, I would never create a mood board. Never. Like, that's just not what I'm interested in. Like, I want to experience it and feel it and capture it. And then hopefully that translates to someone that's witnessing the artwork. And with artists, like if you're in their space, that's why I just let them be. Like, you know, I might say, hey, look, I need to get a photo of you, you know, doing X or Y. Like, I think that'd be an interesting photo, but I'll just let them show me how they do that. And then I'll work around them. So I'm not interrupting what they'd naturally do anyway. So you got to prompt them a little bit. But sometimes you just let them go and, you know, they'll just keep making art. Like, and it's a beautiful thing to just watch and witness.
Yeah, just let them just get in the zone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when they're in the zone and you just being that fly on the wall, then you get in the zone and then there's just like this creative harmony that's happening in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really nice, like, when artists see the photos, like, I think sometimes they're apprehensive of what may come out of, like, the time that we spend together. But then when they see the photographs and they're like, dude, like, these are amazing for whatever reason, like, they feel really seen or they feel really understood, like, that's what kind of like makes me happy, because it's like, yeah, I'm trying to like express what you do, like just through a mode of kind of creativity that I use, which is photography or filmmaking. And yeah, that's the kind of best compliment you can get. It's like if they say, fuck, I forgot you were here, or they see the photos and they're like, man, you like, I've never been photographed like this. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome.
When you say that you don't use a mood board for personal projects, would you even look at other photographers or their works to try to get any kind of inspiration, whether it be even for some technical prowess? I'm not necessarily saying what sort of content.
Yeah.
But do you take inspiration from?
It's funny. I collect a lot of photo books.
Yeah.
And I use a lot of like that as my kind of reference, because I think that's the medium I want to kind of express myself in the most, is like a book format rather than on the internet as a single image. And I'm super inspired by people, but I don't make work like them. Like I don't think that would be honest to who I am, is like like seeing someone amazing and being like, that's so great. I'm going to learn how to light and to shoot and what lenses they use and like trying to mimic them. It's kind of not what inspires me. So yeah, of course, I absorb a lot of photography from.
So it would just be more the storytelling then?
Yeah, yeah. And that's like the most interesting thing is because like two people in a room together, like you can't preconceive what's going to happen there. Like, so you got to go off energy and you got to go off how someone's feeling or how comfortable they are, and then try to make that like a really kind of resonating kind of image. And I found when I have made mood boards, or like what I actually do more than make mood boards is just draw. Like I'll draw a little kind of really crappy stick figure, like kind of frames that I'm like, I kind of want a shot like this, and I might show someone. But then half the time those photos feel so staged to me after I see them that, yeah, they're a good starting point and it kind of sets the mood of what I'm trying to get. But then it's like what happens in between and after that is probably more interesting because it's like, it's not as staged. So yeah, I try to like, if I'm going to preconceive anything, I'll just try to do it out of my brain and draw it out. Really badly, which is always funny when you're showing another visual artist, but they all get it. Like they understand that it's just a sketch of kind of what you're trying to create. But then I always allow wriggle room after. Just like always allow space to kind of deviate from that, because that's generally where the interesting stuff is. For me anyway, yeah.
To juxtapose that with the commercial side of things then, because you could absolutely look at other commercial photographers and be like, I'm taking that idea exactly how you've done that, because I think that you've showcased that product or captured that mood perfectly.
Yeah. And you can see a lot of photographers that do that. And like, that's cool. Like everyone's got to make some bread and like keep a roof over their head. Like I get it. And like, I've definitely done it in the past. Like that's what a client and a brand have exactly wanted. So that's what you're there to do. That's why I go back to saying that photography is a trade. Like I know that I'm like just there to press the button and to capture exactly what they need. And I'm totally okay with that. It's also why I don't show much commercial work on my personal kind of pages. Like it doesn't interest me. Like that's their thing and I'll do it for them. But it's not what excites me when I go home and, you know, I want to tell everyone about. But it is very good at kind of teaching me the skill set of A, communication with brands and clients, B, how to like really, they can show me any image and then I have to have the skill set to be able to recreate that. And that's like a skill in itself. But do I take that out into personal work? Not really. Like I might have a few lighting techniques or lenses that I want to just experiment with. And that's where I base like my project is like, I'm going to experiment with this kind of look and then go from there and just see what comes my way, because it always tweaks itself to whatever it needs to become.
Dude, I'm interested to know about how you separate the two of them and have that clean line, because that's something that like when, you know, as a graphic designer, speaking with clients and trying to keep things, it has to, the work that I do as a designer has to be commercially viable.
Of course.
Right. Like, and to what you were saying about photography, your commercial photography, it's a trade.
Yeah.
So graphic design for the most part is a service, and whatever artistic expression or outlet that I have, then that's purely reserved for me. But I don't know, I'm not convinced that I'm able to put a clean line between the two, whether it be like, oh, I think that, you know, this color contrasts well with this color. It might not necessarily communicate what I'd want to artistically, but I know it looks good, right? So just having those little influences and then having to call myself out on that. You don't find that one trickles into the other?
No.
Fuck.
Yeah. I think because I've been at it for a while. I think when I was younger, I might have struggled a bit more. And it was really interesting. I remember having like a great little kind of like off the cuff convo with a photographer that I used to assist with. His name's Josh Robenstone. He's like amazing, right? And I was chatting to him, and I was in my early 20s, and I was like assisting him, and I was like, oh, I'm doing all this personal stuff with all these artists and musicians, and then I've got this commercial stuff. And he's like, just get 2 cameras. And he's like, this camera you use commercially, so anything that you kind of interact in a commercial sense, you get paid for, you use that. And then anything that's for you, you use that. And that like simple kind of logic, it really stuck with me. And I've used it ever since. So I know that like I have cameras that I use, and that they're my project cameras. And then I have like generally cameras that brands have bought for me that I use for commercial work, and that's it.
So that's an intentional line in the sand there as well, just to keep them separate. It's almost like they say that don't take your laptop into the bedroom and don't do work. Don't overstimulate your brain where you're meant to be sleeping. And I just think I might shoot 9 to 5 and then walk out the door and have my little camera on me, and then it's like then I start shooting for myself. It's like I'm not someone that gets kind of weighed down with the burdens of like commercial work. Like quite often I'll shoot something straight after I'm working. Like it doesn't faze me. Like I've been doing it for so long that it is just part of what I do. And there'll be lulls. Like there'll be times that I won't shoot for months, but then all of a sudden a bolt of inspiration will hit me and I'll just shoot flat out for ages. And it's like, I know that I've been doing this for long enough that you don't have to shoot all the time to be getting better at your craft. Like sometimes you just need to sit still and breathe through it and just kind of like absorb everything that's going on in your life and then make a body of work. And that's kind of what's been with this book. It's like, I think I spent the last year just processing files to get ready for print, like, you know, and that was really good for me because you get to sit with each image for a long time and you really start to see what the project's about when you're staring at one thing for an hour or two at a piece. And then you put it together and you work with your designer, and then all of a sudden they show you a new version of it because they're looking at it from a design lens. And then now that that's kind of done, I'm ready to start shooting. Like before it's even produced, it's like I'm ready to do some new things. So how many images did you start off with for this book, and what are you left with at the end of it?
I probably shot like 40 or 50 rolls of 120. So that's times that by 10. So like 400 photos. And I think the page count that we're sitting at the minute is 112.
Okay.
So which kind of shows you like how much I shoot to how much makes the final cut. And that kind of waiting and just like I'm rarely someone that will shoot the same scene twice. And that can be annoying for like people that are sitting with me as a sitter, like for a portrait, because they're just like, man, this guy's slow. But I also think it gets you better photos because they've spent the time with you. And the cameras I'm using, like some of them are quite big and they're clunky and they take a long time to kind of operate. So that also helps you connect with someone because you got to fill the space. So
and then like once you take your 400-500 shots, there is that rumination and having to sit with the images and then figure out what the narrative is. Yeah. Like there's so many times I'm sitting here, well, we were chatting off camera before and I was saying to you how I prefer to just wing a conversation because there have been times when I'll have a guest on and I know that there are particular touch points that I want to speak on and just let the conversation kind of move around that. I don't like to be too prescriptive, but there have been times when I've had a conversation thinking that it was mostly going to be about this. And then as I'm editing, I'm like, actually, there's so much more outside of this here that just adjacent to that, just on a slight tangent, this is now the focal point. So what took me into the conversation became very much secondary to what I took away from it. And I imagine that'll be much the same as putting together a book. Like you have that intention, this carrot that you've dangled in front of you saying that I want to go out and capture these events out in rural Victoria. And then before you know it, like I've walked away with these friendships, these relationships, and this whole new understanding of what this whole scene is all about. How do I tell that in the best way,
Yeah.
which you had no idea about
No.
when you started off.
And it's way bigger than I thought, which is that it still blows me away. But I think like having that space from shooting to editing allows you to look at that story a bit more kind of like with fresher eyes. And sometimes it is the photos you just see something, you're like, oh, it's kind of cool, bang, snap it, and then move on. But then when you revisit like later, you're like, actually, there's something really like that's where the thing is. And then when you go back and photograph the same subject matter again, like a week or a month later, like you're like kind of looking for those things now. Because like the little details and how people hold themselves, or like the garments they're wearing, or like what is an identifier of that little image that you found that you can then multiply into the new image. Because I was never really interested about like the kind of extreme sports side of it. Like I was really kind of only interested about the people that were there. And then that like started to tell me more stories about like who they are and kind of the turning points in their life, because it's not a thing that people do forever. Like they just physically can't. Like a lot of them get really injured, and it's like fascinating to like what drives you to kind of want to do that and to be that focused about like what you're about to do. And it's like really fascinating because you think they're really kind of macho people, but they're actually really quite soft and gentle. And they just go into this state where they're like, before they're about to do their thing, they're so quiet. Like it's amazing. And then as soon as that is released and they're kind of finished, like the adrenaline dump is there, and it's like intoxicating to watch. Like it's crazy. And that's why I think they keep going back. But yeah, I tried to photograph a lot of like the moments just before and then just after. But even still, it's like, did I do a good enough job to represent that? I don't know. But there's some interesting photos there for sure.
It always comes back down to human interaction and human stories. It always is, man. And, you know, like, and you said it best then. For you, it was like wanting to see what the scene was about. And then you peel back the layers. It's like, actually, it's not about the scene. It's about the people that are in the scene. And I find that to be the most fascinating part, because speaking with other creatives and bunch of photographers, that there's like this drive to connect with people, and it just so happens that you gravitated towards a camera, so-and-so gravitated towards a brush. You know, whatever your medium of choice may be, it is always about the human experience and human connections.
Well, from my first photography class, I only kind of did it, you know, I was a classic story of like, I had a few friends that were into photography, and I was always into like photo books and like National Geographic. Like we moved around a lot as a family, so there was always like photo albums everywhere. So I was always looking at photographs. And then, but I never thought like, yeah, I'll do this as a subject. Like it didn't really enter my mind. And then a few friends did it in about year 11, and I was like, oh, cool. I'll just join them, hang out, like take some flicks. And I remember the first lesson, I'll never forget it. My photography teacher's like, here's how you roll, like here's how you load a like K1000, like the most basic camera ever. Here's how you load it with black and white film. And like, cool, loaded it up, closed the back. And he's like, over the weekend, I want you to shoot the photographs. And on Monday, I'll teach you how to develop them. And as soon as I clapped that back, I was like, what am I going to shoot? And I just went to my mates who were like, they were playing a battle of the bands that weekend. And, you know, I just went to the front row and shot probably the worst roll of film ever known to man. But it was like my friends in a band, and I was always really interested in music. So it was just a good excuse to get close. And as soon as I finished that roll, I was like, what's on here? And that like, and then to watch the alchemy of like the magic that happens when you develop film on a contact like sheet, and it's like it develops in front of, that was it. But it just switched something in me, and I was just like, even though I wasn't very good, I just knew that this was something I wanted to do. And I just kind of like dove all the way in and just haven't stopped since. But it was always because, as you rightfully said, like I was curious about things. Like music was a massive passion. So I just like, a camera is a perfect excuse to go to gigs and like photograph your friends that playing bands and like, you know, especially like I grew up listening to music and like hardcore music and punk music, which is so energetic. So it's like you can't explain what a show like that is like to someone that's never been. But if you show them a photo, they're kind of like, what the hell is happening? So to be able to like bring a camera to that and like just document what I loved, which at that time was like punk and metal and hardcore music. And then the older you get and the more things you get into, you just all of a sudden you have a camera and someone's like, hey, can you take a photo of me doing, you know, my band out the front or of a gig or whatever. It just kind of snowballs and you just all of a sudden hold a camera all the time. And the fact that I get paid for it, I still pinch myself. Like it's been a crazy journey. But it's all based off curiosity.
Yeah. And the music, the gigs that you're going to, they're doing that for that human interaction as well.
100%.
Yeah.
And what's wild to me is like, I used to get like assignments where it's like, go and hang out with this person and like take their photographs while they're in their hotel room. They might be touring here from the States. And then like, I don't really know who they are because they're kind of junior in their career. And then all of a sudden they become the biggest person in the world. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, like we were literally just hanging out, taking some photos. Then I saw them perform. And it's crazy. And it's like I grow with it. So like my musical styles change. So it's like I was working at a magazine called ACCLAIM and like they were so heavy into the like rap and kind of hip hop stuff from the States. And it's like, I remember one of my first jobs was to shoot Kid Cudi. It's like, if you were to tell me now, it's like, yeah, you got to go shoot. I would have like, I'd be beside myself. But back then it was just like, yeah, he's in a hotel room. Like, just go hang out. Like, you know, this is the premise of the article. Get some photos like that. And I just kept meeting people like that. And it's wild because then all of a sudden they're big names and you're just like, we have these early photos of these people that were coming out for their first tours. And so I worked for them for years. And then I worked with Jerry from the Operatives, documenting kind of musicians that he brought out. So like, then you go on to the Opera House with Flying Lotus as they're doing.
Oh, you shot Flying Lotus?
Yeah. Sick. So it's just like things like that. And it's like, I'm just a dude that has a camera. Like, you know, these aren't like.
But they're just people that make music.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, and they're the same as artists. Like, what I'm really inspired by is like what drives and motivates those people. Like, not necessarily like who they are as a personality. Like, I'm not someone that's like, I have to shoot them because they're a big name. I'm more like, who are these people and what do they do that makes them super interesting? And then they see that in me that I'm curious and they just keep unpacking it for you. And then sometimes you get good photos, sometimes you get trash photos. But
I'm finding through speaking with people like you and other people that have worked alongside notable people is that the commonality between them is hard work for sure, right? They work hard, but I think that the scaffolding for the hard work is that they don't recognize that there's a ceiling.
No.
And I don't think that there's ever been a thought that there's a limit to it. And and then that just gives them the permission to keep going and going and going. And before you know it, they're in this position where they're touring the world. Yeah. Or they're making big blockbuster movies. Yeah. Or they're exhibiting their work globally. Is that they were never, or maybe they were told that they wouldn't make it. But at the core, it was never an idea that they entertained.
Oh, I don't think any artist that I've met has ever gone into it to try to make money. I think that's why it's easy for me to switch off between the commercial and the art side because I view them completely differently. Like,
Different sort of rules, different
yeah,
parameters.
100%. One makes me money and that keeps a roof over my
The
head.
other one doesn't.
And the other one, like, and you can make a little bit of money, but that's not what
It's not what it's for.
I'm not like going out to rural Victoria to make money. Like, I'm going there because it's like this, like, subculture that is just like absolutely kind of just like opened my eyes to what else is out in rural Victoria. Like,
Yeah, it's a really interesting paradigm how, like, to be successful depends on how you want to frame success.
yes.
Yeah, it depends how you want to frame success firstly, but I guess just to be financially rewarded for your creativity, you can't have that focus.
Yeah.
But it's the ones that don't have the focus that are more financially successful.
Yeah.
And the ones with the finance as the goal will just never make it.
Yeah. But there's some that just like, they are so good at what they do that the money comes. Like, they're just like, they're natural talents and people want to interact with them. They want to purchase their work or see their exhibitions or buy their books. And it's like, they just make a living. And like, that's amazing.
I do. I think there's more to it than natural talent. I don't think that natural talent is going to get you, it's not going to get you very far. I think it will get you into the game.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to get you very far without having that extra layer and, having that tenacity, having the ability to just the perseverance.
Yeah.
And to remove that ceiling, right? Like, if you're not working with a ceiling, then you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Oh, I mean, it's crazy to think, like, if I look back at the early years and it's like some of the money that I was bringing in, like how little that was, and I was just so motivated to keep going, like, that's crazy to me. Most people would give up. I remember once I was asked to like give a lecture at a university, and someone right at the end on question time was like, how do you know if you're ready to like jump in and be a freelancer? I was like, when you can balance $1,000 for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, that's the true test. Because if that's a worry for you, then this might not be your game, because there's dry times. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. But if your passion is going to override the fact that like you're not going to stop, then you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to push through that. And then you get smarter about like how to set up your kind of commercial self and make sure that you're getting paid regularly, or work directly for brands, or do whatever it is you need to do to kind of keep going. But yeah, look, the financial limitations of any creative practice, like, you've got to be willing to do it when there's no money coming in, and you got to be like still motivated when there's tons of money coming in. So you just got to keep going.
Yeah.
It's in you. Like, you can tell a good artist because it's like you'll be at their house and hanging out with them, and they'll just be sketching. It's like, they're gonna do it anyway. Like, if you were there or not, or you got a camera, like, they're just gonna do it.
Yeah. There is that drive, and it permeates. It kind of like bridges across work and life, and that's one of the things I find really fascinating about creative people, is that being able to marry it into your life and having it such an important part of it that they're feeding off each other. And that's why I find it really interesting that you have this ability to really compartmentalize a lot of what you do and to keep very clear lines there. I've always found working strictly for commerce and having that as a way of cashing in a check. Yeah, I found that really soul destroying. That's because I didn't have the boundaries and I didn't have a subset of rules for this and a set of rules for this. For me, it was always like, it had to always be one and the same. And I'd say that as a flaw, as something that I've recognized now, that if I was better able to treat this, let's say when I was working full time, keep that as strictly me clicking buttons and cashing in a check and then switching off once I've clocked off, and then being able to put energy towards the creative pursuit. But I was always one to try to inject too much of myself into the commercial work. And always to a detriment, because they don't give a fuck about you, man. They don't. Like,
Some do. Some care.
some care
There's
a
some
bit,
good clients out there.
certainly,
Yeah.
but not your livelihood,
Yeah.
right? Like, bottom line is the bottom dollar.
Yeah.
Where for you, that you still have a life that you need to carry on when there is no more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for them, you're largely expendable. You're entirely expendable.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I've been really lucky. I've got to work with some people that are like, they're great brands. They have great storytelling. And I do put a lot of myself into work, but I know that it's not, it is that like you're working for them and like, I do get a lot of like satisfaction about completing a brief and like making a great campaign and rolling it out nationally.
That's important as well, man.
Like,
Just
so
to find satisfaction in that, for sure.
Yeah, so it's like, and it's like the thrill of like coming up with a new brand campaign that might run for 6 weeks that has all these deliverables and like they're big shoots. Like, that's exciting. But do I look back at like all those commercial milestones that I've hit, and do they kind of resonate the same way as like when I've just been in Morocco for a month shooting a personal project? Not really. Like, they fuel me and allow me to go and do those things, and that's why I treat them with a healthy amount of respect. But who wants to go and talk about their commercial work? Like, it's like, I work the hardest. Like, yeah, true.
I'm sure many do,
True.
and that'll be their primary focus. I think that they could also be the type of people that are skewed that way, that they have, I guess, more of a strategic approach to their work.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, that you need to find satisfaction or find some kind of takeaway, a positive takeaway from every experience, right? So where I was like, for me, working from a commercial point of view was just like drudgery. It was just, it was like the bane of my existence. Like, why am I dedicating my energy towards making someone else money?
Yeah.
That was how it felt
right.
for me. And it was a terrible approach. I didn't accept it and recognize it for what it was.
Yeah.
And I was battling it the whole time, where I think that, there are people like yourself that are able to say that this is what it is and how great of an experience this is.
Yeah.
This is what this is, how great of an experience this is.
When I was younger, I used to say, like, the line was like, there's nothing more punk rock than getting paid for learning what you love.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how I look at it. Like, I get to, honestly, like, the brands that I've worked with, and some for a long time and some are big names, it's like, they've really helped me kind of get to where I'm going. And it's like, I owe them credit for that. Like, I wouldn't have got the exposure or the experience or the connection to like understanding how gaffers work if I didn't have them in my life, like, which is amazing. And it's like, I shot just the other week, and it's like, we were using a gaffer that worked on Star Wars, and it's like, would I ever use that in my personal work? No, probably not. But like, there's things I learned from him just from being
It's
around
just a cool
him.
experience.
Yeah, and it's like, he had been working in the industry as long as I've been alive. Like, that's fucking cool. Like, so you meet people like that along the way, and you realize, like, yeah, this thing is bigger than what you create. Yeah, we're a part of it, and we're making like work that kind of lives within that realm. But yeah, like, I was talking to him, and he's just hella keen to write a book. Like, he's a gaffer, but he wants to write a book. Like, it's amazing. Like, you can split those things up, but he loves what he does. Like, it's so evident. And he really got me inspired about like the next personal project. Like, how do I introduce like artificial light into that? Because predominantly I don't use it. I might bring one thing to kind of add a little bit of extra sauce to what's already there, but I don't really use it as a thing that like, this is how the image is going to look. But he kind of showed me a few things that I was like, fuck, maybe I'll like bring the lights next time and like try to see if I can milk out a little bit more energy from images just by kind of, learning some things from him. And like, how cool is that? Like, and I wouldn't get that experience if I wasn't working commercially. Like,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Your commercial work though, there's a great deal of creative integrity in those projects though, right? Like, it's not just a matter of selling for selling's sake.
No.
That there is, when you're saying like with ACCLAIM, it's there to showcase a subculture.
Yeah.
Right. So in order to do that, you have to really understand the people in it and how to you connect with them. And so there's a great degree of authenticity.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine someone that didn't get that subculture or didn't understand music to go out and capture moments like that, though.
Yeah, you're probably right there. Like, I have been really lucky that it's like I've got to work with people that just their business model is like about authenticity. It's like if it's ACCLAIM with kind of rap and hip hop and Jerry with the operatives, like they love that stuff. And yeah, I got to work as like the head of video production for a publishing agency that ACCLAIM was within. So we're working on all brand campaigns that kind of came through that. And like every brand that we worked with, whether it be like Nike or Adidas or Converse, were always about, we're coming to you to tell authentic stories. So my role was to like help formulate what those stories were, go and speak to the talent, film it, like produce the piece, and then put it out as branded content. So yeah, authenticity has always been a really powerful, like, and maybe I don't think about that as much, how lucky I've been, but I've always had the opportunity to tell stories.
And they had the influence and the power to challenge creativity as well.
Oh yeah,
right?
we go up against brands all the time.
Yeah, and you know they say that they want you to create this particular campaign, but it's not like these are brands that are leading the forefront of their industries, that they're pushing boundaries. So they have to, and that's part of their value system, right? Like if you're going to be doing something that's going to look like so-and-so over there, it's like they don't want that. They're not after that.
One of the best jobs, I worked for Converse for 4 years and I was their photographer and doing everything from branded campaigns to e-commerce work, but it was a luxury because they're a brand that everyone knows. So they don't at any stage have to be like, we make shoes. It's like everyone knows they make shoes and they know what their shoes look like. But what we did get to do was like, who are the people that tell these stories the most authentically? And quite often we just work with the talent to be like, what are we trying to say here? Like, you tell us, like you inform us and we'll make it look flashy and kind of like on brand, but like we'll really let you dictate. And that was like a blessing.
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort, right? You're pulling in a lot of creative minds and a lot of creative inspiration from all directions.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been amazing. And then that kind of like having that authentic connection to people is like probably why I'm still really interested in photographing people outside of work. And it doesn't really matter in what they do. Like if you ask enough questions and you give enough people the like space to tell you, like you're going to learn things about everyone, like if you've got a camera or not. And it's like, that's just a skill I think I've learned over time. And I think it's also something that I'm just like extremely curious about people and what makes them tick anyway. So I don't really have problems going up to people that I've never met and like just chatting to them and then just like seeing what comes out of it. Cause like quite often like most people have really interesting either views on the world or like have an information set that can really open your eyes to something. And it's just like, you just got to allow that space to happen and be ready for them to tell you, like, I'm not someone that's really going to go and just dominate the conversation to get my point across. It's not really my MO, but for to hear about other people's stories, like that's amazing. And
start a podcast.
yeah, maybe. But then when you add a camera in it, there's an extra element because like people want to be seen in a certain way. And sometimes like you got to encourage them that like who they are naturally is like how they should be seen. Like you don't really masquerade that to what's popular or trendy or this. It's like who they actually are is cool. Like the coolest people don't know they're cool. Like they're just who they are, and that's what attracts you to them.
There is such a degree of letting go, and like we touched on earlier, how you're able to capture and let them be vulnerable and let them just be themselves. You know, like doing this, I hated before all this, and I don't even acknowledge that there's cameras on us, right?
Yeah, I'm trying not to. It's
Yeah.
so weird to be on this side of the camera
Yeah.
and knowing the tricks. You're
So
like,
I don't,
Yeah.
I generally just don't acknowledge it, but I'm quite comfortable with hearing my voice and seeing myself now, like as I'm editing.
Yeah.
But before this, I didn't realize like how like crooked my teeth were or how lopsided my ears are until I started like filming and recording and taking shots of myself. I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck. And then I was like, well, that's just how you look, dude. That's you.
It. Yeah.
Like
the interesting way that social media and the internet works is like you have to put so much of yourself present.
Yeah.
And forward. And that's not really what I'm about. Like I don't even really post that much. Because it's like it's not what I'm in it for. But to do it, I think is a really interesting skill to learn. But
different strokes, man.
Yeah.
I think that like for some it works. For others, you don't necessarily need to put yourself out there. But for those that have, they have seen a significant amount of success.
Oh, 100%.
You know, that I think that there's more value. And speaking with Danielle Weber, she's a muralist, and she openly discusses about how her work isn't the best. She is incredibly successful because she's done everything else that you need to be successful in the way that the game is played now.
Yeah.
So much like how you've talked about your commercial work, she sees her work, her actual painting work as a trade, but most of the work that she does is going to be the business side of things, the business acquisition, the social media, and she's just got a good understanding of how the other components need to be played. And then the work just comes.
Yeah.
Once you take care of the rest of it, the work comes.
Yeah.
But that's her approach, and it works for her makeup of everything else, right? Like how she aligns all those ingredients.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, like, for people to kind of feel connected to the work, you got to tell the story. It's like this,
100%.
and that's maybe something I've neglected in the past. Like, yeah, I've shot a lot of things, but I don't really wave the flag about them. I don't really post too much. Like, I might give it to the person that I photographed, and that's it. But what I realized, like, especially with the end of this project, is when I sat down and chatted with people properly and like learnt more about them, is like that's what people want to hear and see and like feel. And it's like that's why I'm on things like this today. It's like just to kind of like express who these people are and what they do, and yeah,
I'm trying to understand it a little bit better. I think there is a degree of tall poppy syndrome. Yeah, where people have a fear of being cut down because they're sharing too much, and they have a fear of being viewed as someone that's egotistical.
Yeah.
But when you have that, and there's also on the other side of it where we want to hear the stories of other people, yet we don't think that people want to hear our stories, right? Like there's that weird sort of that contradiction happening there. But in today's world, it's a bit of a process of slowly letting your guard down and starting to realize that people don't give a shit about your shit as much as you give a shit about it.
Yeah.
And
Very true. Very true. It's like the old saying of like when you spill mayonnaise or mustard on your shirt, you think it's the end of the world, but no one else even notices.
Don't care.
It's that kind of thing. But like, I think if you were to ask me 5-10 years ago to do something like this, I would have been like, nah, no way. Like, I think maybe the way that I've viewed the photographic world and who I was like really looking at as inspiration, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not there yet. But now I think I realize, well, like, yeah, but like everyone's on a different journey, and it's like where my work is going, like I can't even predict that. So it's like, it's just trying to be present in the same way that I'm present with people that I photograph, and just like absorb it and just like be a part of it and help yourself express it. And this is kind of the way that you get to learn about who you are and who other people are, is just by conversing with them.
That's something that I'm trying to be mindful of, is telling myself that I've always been telling myself, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm not good enough. And there's been people that I've reached out to that are well and truly, they're way down the line,
Yeah.
that don't feel that they have enough to share. But what I'm trying to do with this podcast, and what I've done from the start, is to get a range of people at different stages of their careers. Like, I've had guests on that were exhibiting for the first time, all the way through to having guests on that have exhibited globally.
Yeah.
And it's a spectrum
Yeah.
of things, right? And not only just a spectrum, like how you do your particular thing is how you do it, but you will have something worth sharing. There's something that I want to be able to learn from you. I think there's something that you can learn from everybody.
100%.
Yeah, like you've had your life experience.
Yeah.
That is going to be different to the previous photographer
Yeah.
that I've spoken to,
100%.
and then the next one, and how they view, the influences that they bring in, how it changes their work. So I get that, like, there's so many people that will think that they're not good enough, and I think it might be, whether it's something that's inherent in creativity.
Yeah.
There's always that pursuit of improving and getting better.
Yeah.
And looking at other people that are ahead of you by however you want to measure it, and saying that I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
But then that person is also looking at the next person saying I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth, because we're on this pursuit there's no end.
Yeah.
It just keeps going. So
Yeah.
you're never going to get there. You're going to die before you get there.
And that's like, photography is a really interesting thing because you get to look at your life as well, and you're like always reviewing what you've done and who you've been with and who's in and out of your life and where you're at. Like, if you're in a bad mood, like you've got those photos and you've got the good photos, and it's like, it's really fascinating to me that it's like you get to look back and you're like, this is how I've grown. And it's like, when you also then get to release it to the public and share it with them, and they see the growth in your journey, that's also exciting too. But
yeah, I think that's a really beautiful thing that photography has that many other creative outlets don't have, is that time capsule.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's why I wait sometimes until I look backwards, because it's like, then, I don't want to have the rosy glasses on all the time. It's like you kind of push through and you work through your stuff and create all this new work. But then sometimes it's nice to look back and you're like, oh fuck, there's actually something like there, like, and then you go back to like how you were living and who you were hanging out with and what musical inspiration you had and all that sort of stuff.
And then introducing that element of nostalgia that wasn't there at the time as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, I picked up a book the other day and it was like Fitzroy in this 1974, and it's like, it was amazing. Like, the photos are great, and it's like, you know where all those streets are. Like, we've all walked those streets.
I love it because there's other photographers that are in this future history mix that have either released a book or about to.
Yeah.
And I find that really fascinating how, for you guys, it was a goal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to release a book. Coincidentally or not coincidentally, that you're all from an era of film.
Yeah.
So there is this tactility that resonates with you guys. That, that they chose to put a book together, and it just feels like a way of solidifying your work and keep it in this particular moment. Otherwise, you're just keeping everything on a hard drive and collecting dust. Yeah. And there's just so much value in being able just to put it out there and having it as a stamp in time, saying that I did this in this particular time in my life. And, years down the track, when you're that old man taking photos and telling stories through your photos, like, here's one of these
rodeos.
You
want to show your kids your phone? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
here's my iCloud account.
yeah, exactly. Good. I can't remember the login, but yeah, I think it's like, maybe it's my age, but growing up in a generation that a photo album was like your personal history, and mine was stacked because my dad was in the military. We moved around a lot. Like, we lived overseas. For a few years, like, my auntie lived with us, and she was like just an amateur like photographer. I just loved to take photos of the family, and she just like filled it up. So we have so much stuff documented. So we've flipped through those things so many times.
Yeah, and we're missing that, dude. I think that's a big thing that we have lost in society, is flicking through albums, flicking through the phones. It's just not the same, man. It's not the same. And it's much like going through Netflix or hitting up a video
Yeah.
store. They're just not the same.
Yeah,
thing,
the
man.
resonance is different. Like
Yeah.
you talked about the tactility. It's like today I was literally looking at what covers are going to go on this and like why is that important? And it's like, yeah, there's a cost implication of doing it, but it's like we were like talking about a color on a certain fabric and it's like this feels like the project looks. And that's like really important. You can't get that across in another medium. And I think, yeah, as photographers, like there's so many amazing books out there. Sometimes you feel like, am I just adding something to the mix, or you know, like is there something in this project that I think other people should see?
But even if you are just adding
Yeah.
something to the mix,
It's
think that
important to
it's
do.
important just
Yeah.
to make sure that there is still a mix.
100%. But growing up, like I used to any kind of like magazine or like street press or like, you know, Beat magazine, I used to cut it all up and like stick together my own visual diary and just like really absorb photography that way. Like pre-internet Tumblr, I used to just cut stuff up.
Yeah.
I remember I went to a garage sale and for $10 I bought a full moving box. It blew my mind, full of the Vibe and Source magazines.
Oh shit!
Yeah, full. The dude's like $5-10. Like, take it. You can, if you can walk it out of here, it's yours. And I was like, sick. And like, I was into a little bit of hip hop here and there. Like, I had a few friends slide me Wu-Tang tapes, and I was like, what the fuck is this? But then to see it visually, like, and really read, and then like get stuck in, and then understand there's things like Alpha Fame magazine out there, and you have to go pick it up. So you kind of go on this scavenger hunt through the city and go to skate shops and you know, whatever stores to find these magazines. And I used to just cut them up, and my room was so messy. If you came to my house when I was like 18, it was just pictures on the wall and prints everywhere, and I was just absorbing like printed material. And I think now I'm like, that's what I want to create. It's like I want to create books and images that you kind of have to flip through and see.
It would be nice to go back to that time.
Yeah,
actually.
but that's how you learn.
That's how
like
you
you
get it.
had to hunt.
What
like,
do kids? What do they have up on their walls these days? If not for magazines and
I'm
and
sure
posters?
they have pictures and posters and like, you know what I mean? But like I'd carry a little point and shoot like Kodak camera that we used to get from the supermarket and take it to parties, and then they'd all be printed out on your walls, and then they're just kind of absorbed into your brain, and you just then
that was like the aesthetic, right? Like
Yeah.
the 80s, 90s kids, you just have random shit pasted up in the wall.
because it's what you were
You just
into.
cut
I
up
think-
magazines and posters and
Yeah, but you also had to hunt for your identity a bit more. Like you had to kind of really like
you had to.
who you are. Like you had to like search for it. And like I actually think it's amazing that kids these days, they have such a plethora of like things that they're into. But and like for us being, you know, a bit older, it's like you might have just hung out with a kid because of a sticker on the bottom of their skateboard, and you're like, oh shit, like you like that band that I like, so you just, you know, drum up the courage to go chat to them, and then, you know, all of a sudden then they're your mates and you'd hang out every other weekend. But or you'd have to go to a CD store and just a vinyl store and just like hunt for records. And
But I think that's what added to it. I think that like finding your identity but making it harder, having those extra layers and that friction to find it.
Yeah,
I think that really helped, right? Because when you have this abundance of information and abundance of inspiration, it just seems like it's more diluted than ever, right? Like everyone likes a bit of everything.
Yeah,
I could be completely wrong. I'm too old to know
that's-
what the kids are into. But
yeah, I think that's trying to keep up with that is it's a wild man's game. But like, I think what's really interesting is I said before, like I was always into like more aggressive music from really young. Like I remember the first time I ever heard Rage Against the Machine, I was in like grade 2 or 3, and the neighbors next to me were blaring it every weekend. And I was like, what is this sound? Like, and then I saw the film clip of like Killing in the Name of on Video Hits, which in that era, like that's how you saw cool shit, video hits, right? But, and then you think about that one film clip, like amongst like Crisscross and like all these other kind of like acts, you see this really aggressive black and white like mosh pit. I was hooked. I was like, that's me. So I was always going down this path of like heavy music. But then my auntie, when she was like, I was like 15, handed me like 10 records. And it was like James Brown, Bob Marley, like Aretha Franklin, Tom Waits. And she's like, I know you're going to like what you like, but just understand there's other stuff out there. So I always had this like openness to other things from really young. And I think that has like translated to later when I was like working for ACCLAIM and operatives and like all these other people. I was still into what I was into, like, but then I was open to new sounds and like new people and new ways of thinking, just because when I was young, my auntie just like graced me with like, here's some knowledge. Like, I know you're a kid, but like, and sometimes like it took 10 years to figure out what a Tom Waits record is when you're 16. Like, you know, you got to do a few years of art school until you're like, oh, I get the croaky vibe. But yeah, it's like really interesting that it's like early, and my dad especially, like even though he was in the military, like he's a really kind of open guy, and he was always telling me about like kind of really salt of the earth things that kind of open my mind rather than close it. And I think I just always carried that through of like, and I still like, I look to that now of like you said before, like you don't know what you don't know. Like you just have to be open to what people will tell you, and that can influence you.
And I love seeing how you're able to take inspiration from one part of your life.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, not meaning to use the pun, but like see it through this particular lens.
Yeah.
And then taking that into in a different area.
Yeah.
I found that like having that kind of like cross collaboration is how you're able to push a lot of creativity. Like I love the idea of seeing this one particular artist and then having seemingly no overlap with this artist, and then you get them in the same room and there's this, that, you know, like a Venn diagram and there's that little bit of overlap. What's that overlap look like? So, you know, if you have your punk influence and you're able to take that into the hip hop scene, and all of a sudden now there's this whole spin off of a different genre, and that's what happened in the 90s as well, right?
Yeah,
like that happened. So that's how you're able to push creativity and try new things. And there's so many things that have come off that. Like, you know, you use Rage Against the Machine. That's the perfect example.
Yeah,
like they parlay in so many different areas. They bridge the gap across so many different genres. Yeah. Right. To the point where like they're not even in a genre. They're rage.
They're political as well, which opened a lot of people's eyes, you know?
Yeah.
I think if I was to listen to those records now, like when you're a kid, you're like, well, this is aggressive and fun and whatever. But then you realize the messaging behind it and you're like, fuck, this is actually something else. Like,
yeah.
But I think what was common is like all of those things were like DIY cultures anyway. And it's like, that's what taught me that you just kind of keep testing and fucking up and like trying to make fun things happen and like hanging out with your mates. So I remember one pivotal thing for me is I got to share a studio with a heap of artists, and it was called Studio 615. And essentially like we randomly just got the keys to this place, and like it was in the middle of the city, and there was like 6 different disciplines in there. And so it was like Sam who painted, and Sahil that like did abstract graffiti based stuff, and a lot of characters back then. This is before he kind of moved into the abstract thing that he's doing now. And then we had a guy that from Korea, like Sean Park, who was like just this amazing artist, like lived and breathed art, like slept next to his paintings. Like it was amazing. So we were all kind of in there, and there's a few other people in there, and we were just kind of like chatting and like trying to do the team building thing. Like we'll all do it together, and we got to like put shows on it. But what really happened is we just got to learn from each other that there's so many ways to like express yourself creatively, that like a lot of people that are siloed and don't have that kind of communication with other artists don't get to see. And I'd be working with these guys every day. And as a photographer, they're always leaning on me like, hey, I'm working on this. Can you document this for me? Like, you know, I need flicks of myself or my art or like my process. And I was just like so about it. It was like the best place to kind of like learn as a photographer.
Yeah, cross collaboration, that's key, man.
It's the
That's
best.
absolutely key.
And it's like, it's still what drives me today. And it's like, I think some people just want to express like, you know, like this is what I do and this is how I'm doing it. But I really like to absorb like, how are we doing this together? And it's like some things for sure, you'll create your own tone of voice, but other times it's really nice just to work with someone and just be like, I'm just going to come and witness and I'm going to try to make you look good and like represent you in the way that you want. And then in that, just that, like being the silent witness to people creating, like you learn so much, like, which is amazing. I remember like just the other week I walked in and I photographed Winissa, who's been on this podcast, and it's like watching her tattoo with someone, and it's like her attention to detail and how she kind of interacted with people and how seen she made them feel and like really considered things about people that are going to wear one of her tattoos for the rest of their life. Like it really taught me a lot. And like we never talked about it. It's just something I absorbed from watching. And I was like, that was beautiful. Like she like so good at what she does. Like it was like watching two friends hang out, except one was getting tattooed and one, you know, was doing the tattooing. But to watch that interaction, you're like, there's so many different ways to kind of interact with people. And it just kind of taught me a lot just by being a part of it.
Yeah, she's got this particular approach to her work.
Yeah.
Let me take a step back. Aside from the work, approach to life, right? How she has this gentleness, and when you say attention to detail, high attention to detail, she seems like she's one that's constantly absorbing and observing her surroundings, acutely self-aware, and just so happens she tattoos.
Yeah.
No, that's just what it was, because before
her like calligraphy work is phenomenal.
That's right, yeah, because before she did that, she was doing calligraphy, she was doing design, whatever it may be, right? That was how she just channeled everything about her. Yeah. And now it's just tattoos. Yeah. So it's you know, you give her a brush and it's going to be the same expression, you know, whatever it may be.
100%.
And that's how like we're all kind of connected in that way. I think that the commonality is that there is this drive to express, to communicate, to connect, and you know, you got your weapon of choice. Yeah. And you know, whatever, some tattoo, some want to leave a permanent mark on people, some want to have a permanent mark hanging up on a wall. Yeah. Some want to put it on film. Yeah,
make music. Yeah, it still blows me away. And it's like, you kind of don't know what's coming, right? So it's like to have this tool to be like, we'll just see where a camera takes me. Like, that's kind of insane. Yeah. Like, there's no way I ever thought I would have done a project on Rodeo Riders or done a project in Morocco. Like, there's just no way. It's just, I saw something. Like, I literally remember watching Jim Jarmusch's The Only Lovers Left Alive and seeing Tilda Swinton walk through Tangier in slow motion. And I was just so blown away that I was like, where the fuck is that? Is that like set? Is that a real place? And then I just looked it up, and then within 3 or 4 months I was there. And I literally went there for a month just purely off like one reference from one film, and made a project called Blue Sky Rome that Bloom Publishing put out. And it was just like, you just got to go down the rabbit hole sometimes and see who you are, see what it's about. Yeah. Like, that's just what it's about. And like, for me, it's how lucky is that? I just get to hold a camera and just go exploring and be curious. And
I think we're constantly going down a rabbit hole, but sometimes we think we have more agency and more control over what's going on, or think that we're exercising that control. But in actual fact, more things are happening to us and we're just reactive to it.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, you can definitely... You can try to control it, but I think sometimes that just bites you in the butt. Yeah. You just got to let it be sometimes.
Let it be.
And like, the world's a massive place. Like, and there's so many ways to live a life. And it's like, that's what I'm fascinated by. It's like, if I can make an image of just like how to represent someone of how they live their life, I'm fucking stoked. Like, I'll do that forever. And it's something like, there's other images that I want to do that kind of represent who I am. And that I think sometimes bleeds into those. And some people say I have a style, like it's just inherently how I shoot. Like I don't think about it too much, but that will just generate over time. Like I know there's photos if I'm in a shitty mood, like, and I have been for a week or two, like the beautiful thing about photography is I can still go out and take photos. And it's funny when I see those photos together, they're still beautiful things, but I know the headspace I was in. And it's just nice to be able to express yourself and you're frustrated or whatever. This isn't working. And it's like I can go out and just make these moody photos and other people think they're cool, whatever. But for me, I'm like, that is just summing up where my head was at. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like I got to document that. It was cathartic. It's now gone. And then you can just move on to the next thing. But that is like no one goes through life and they're just like all happy all the time. So it's like, why ignore that? And why not just explore that as a creative avenue as well? And it's like, so then you get to like see it all.
Yeah. 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 Don't run away from it.
Nah, I think, and if you dive into it, like that's when you're going to really see who you are and what you're about, you know? Yeah. That's what I think anyway. Like, it sounds a bit woo woo, but it's like, I've been photographing for so long that like, you know, like relationships with friends that have come and gone, partners, whatever. And so like have photographs of that. And it's like sometimes like, unfortunately your friends pass away and then you get to see that you're like, man, we have this crazy life together. And I have all these photographs and it's like really special. And so it's like, that kind of motivates me to like keep photographing. Like the weird freaky thing about photography is moments only happen once.
Yeah.
Like that's like some photographers I know are hooked on that. They just want it, the decisive moment. Like it's a big thing within photography. And it's like, you know that this is never going to happen again. And that can be very motivating. And some people don't care about that. They just want to create things from like something that they see in their brain and they want to create it. And like you said, they use a camera to do it. But I kind of like, I'm in between those two. So I'm trying to be conscious that like, this is only happening once. But it's also like, but then there's something that I want to express within that. And it's like, if I get a good photo that sums those two things up, I don't care if anyone likes it. Honestly, that to me is like an amazing photo. When people resonate with that and they get it, that's amazing. But if someone's going to throw a like on something, like half of those photos I never even post because it's like, it's not for anyone else. But it's just like, it's so interesting that it's like you can do that. Like you can be right present and just be like, fuck, this is never going to happen again. Bang. And it's like a good flick. And it's like, yeah, if someone resonates with that, that's sick.
That's a whole deeper philosophical question. That the whole
How long
conversation. We'll have another one where we can do that because I hadn't given it enough thought as to the camera being something that captures moments. Of course we know that, and of course we think of it that way, but what does that even mean? And I think that is a really deep philosophical conversation in there.
Oh, and like then the argument of like what you keep in a frame versus keep out of a frame, like the framing of things, like that's really important. And it's like
from an aesthetic point of view, but just from it just snapshot and just capturing this moment because like, like how do we view time, right? We see it as such a linear thing, and then that's just a slice of it on a seemingly infinite time scale of infinitely one way, infinitely the other. That's a perfect slice of it, and it's just been captured in this two-dimensional printout.
Yeah, and you got to be there to take it. Like that's the crazy thing. It's like you got to be willing to either go to a situation or be with someone or whatever, or like just be open to see what you're witnessing out in nature or around you to like document it. So it's like there's a level of awareness. Sometimes you don't know when you're taking it. You're just like, oh, cool, bang. But then sometimes you're like, you just feel it. You're like, I'm in this thing and this is about to happen and bang. Boom. And then what that photo looks like doesn't really matter, right? And that's why I don't really care too much about posting for other people to validate it. It's like, I'm still going to try to take good photographs that resonate with me. And then if I do decide to put them out, which may be many years down the track, like that's sick if someone gets it. Like that's what motivates me. So it's like really fascinating. And it's like a skill. Like to be present when you're in a scene is like a real skill.
Dude, that's probably something that we should put more value on rather than how social media and the algorithms work, how it needs to be current. And then once it's current, once you put it up, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right? And it just gets pushed all the way down. It's like, no. That is just perpetuating the constant need for more. It's like, no, we don't need more. We're better off. Like, these are photos, right? These are little captures, moments in time. The ones that were done years ago have more value than the ones that were done now, right? Because they're holding on to some kind of memory, where the ones that were just taken recently, that memory still exists here, where the other ones don't. They're gone. So to have a record of it, I think that they're more important than something that's current.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like, it's the same reason I go to galleries and look at old work. And I'm inspired by that. You can take the lens of like where that artist was at that time and like its importance, and it just can inspire you. Like
the options are limitless, you know, and I think that you don't necessarily need to prescribe to any one methodology of doing something, right? Like find it within yourself and just lean into what feels right. Like just go with the intuition first.
Well, and just also be open to exploring it all.
Of course.
Like I think it's really limiting. Like if you're just like, oh, I'm never going to do that. It's like, there's probably a reason you should do that. And there's probably a good skill in it if you do learn how to do it.
That's like, probably the best reason to do it if you think that it's out of your grasp. But the exhibition, does it have a name?
It does. It's called Trouble Rides a Fast Horse.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And it's now out in March?
Yeah, March 21st. It's at a gallery called On the Corner, which is in Collingwood. Once I show it in town, I really would love the opportunity to show it regionally.
Of course.
I think sometimes, like, we're talking about viewpoints a lot today, right? And it's like, if you're just like living your life in a city and you see a project on rural Australia, you're like, well, maybe I don't get it. But I think if I was to show that work regionally, like that's what I'm really excited is how do people that are in it and part of that culture actually receive it. So
where can people go to keep up to date with it?
So I'm putting the book out under Mental Vacation. So mentalvacationer.com. They can sign up there for all the things or just follow me on socials. So yeah.
Yeah, sweet, man. And we'll looking forward to it. I'm gonna go check it out because I am pretty curious to see that mishmash of cultures and an interpretation that's uniquely yours, and might even head out to the rural one. I think that's the one that's gonna be, if you get that going.
Yeah, that's one. Like I'm gonna start putting my feelers out there now. I think I was so focused on creating the book that now that we're at the very final stages.
Dude, thanks for the chat, man. That was a lot of fun. Just covered so much ground.
I can't tell. It's like we're just chit-chatting.
Just chit-chat, man.
I didn't even sip my tea.
Oh, you didn't? Thanks, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate it.